Welcome to a special edition of the NWI.com Political Roundtable for Tuesday, November 26th. I'm Robert Blaszkiewicz, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times. Joining with me today, Doug Ross, Editorial Page Editor of The Times, and our special guest, Porter County Assessor John Snyder. Thank you for joining us, John.
Thank you for having me.
We're coming to you a little bit earlier this week for the Thanksgiving holiday, so we hope your holidays plans are going well. But John, it's kind of fortuitous that we have you here today because you've been involved in some kind of high-profile cases recently with the county looking at certain exemptions that entities have for their properties, and then also today you were involved in a hearing on the hospital's assessment, the assessment for the new Porter Regional Hospital. Can you talk about those cases?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We've had a busy couple of weeks at the assessor's office, as was mentioned. Mm-hmm. We've had hearings at the state level with the Steelworkers Union Hall and located in Burns Harbor on State Road 149. We had a recent case or potential case coming up in December, but something we discussed in regards to a religious exemption located here in Porter Township. And then, as you mentioned, yes, we had today we had PWO hearings with the hospital assessment. So that's a wide gamut of different issues going on in the office, the assessor's office here in Porter County.
They all kind of speak, though, to kind of, I guess, fairness issues and kind of making sure that those who should be paying are paying, so that it lessens the burden on the rest of us taxpayers, who, you know, Doug and I, Porter County taxpayers. So kind of lessens the burden on those of us who do pay our property taxes.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say when a group or an individual doesn't pay their fair share based on an unreasonable or an improperly granted exemption, then yes, you have a good point. It affects everybody when the job is not done fairly and equitably.
Now, you're a Republican, and I've heard some people have questioned kind of your stance here and what you're trying to do, saying, well, you're a Republican, you shouldn't be trying to get people to pay more taxes. What's your response when you kind of hear that?
Exemption matters are a matter of law, and it's important to remember that. These aren't knee-jerk decisions based upon one group's standing in society or what they do in society. This is about the use of particular facilities within our county and whether or not they're predominantly used for charitable, educational, religious, or municipal purpose. It's really that simple. It's not that simple because you have attorneys that come in and muddy the arguments, try to make legal arguments one way or the other. There's a lot at stake here, and groups are very motivated to see a tax exempt status within the county to save dollars and not have to pay taxes.
Now, a group like the hospital today, they a larger group that has some deep pockets and large resources to kind of fight these battles. What kind of resources does the county have to on their side?
Any resources that the assessor has are granted in our budgeting process through the county council. Our county council has been very generous to my office, as well as the auditor and the treasurer, and they've given us the ability to hire legal representation when we need it, and I feel that they've been very fair with allowing the assessor to have the tools that he needs to do his job.
It seems to me with the local 6787 Union Hall and with this Preach-It company that has the house and farm and all this stuff, that the really complicating factor is that you have multiple uses of the property. So how do you sift out that situation?
That's a great question, Doug, and that's what's at issue here. There's a specific hurdle that needs to be reached. I'm trying to think of a better word to call it, but we'll call it a hurdle for now. That a taxpayer has the burden of proof to demonstrate to the county that they do predominantly, this is the predominant test, did they predominantly use that facility for charitable and I think Steelworkers was arguing charitable and educational purposes, as the Preach It organization would be potentially arguing. We haven't heard their argument yet, but I think that's a religious exemption. So.
Okay. And so it's, of that percentage of time, how do you use it?
Yeah. Per our understanding and per what my legal expert has stated in these hearings, is that it's a 50%, 51% test. So over 50% of the time, this facility has to be used specifically for specific purposes, such as I said before. Education, that the education hurdle is classes that are offered in a public setting and public education. It relieves government from having to teach those classes. Charitable, you have to use your facility mainly for charitable purpose, and the same for religious, and we can go down the list if we had to. So.
Well, it's a pretty interesting test when you have mixed uses rather than having zoning say you have to do this specific task here at this one site and then go home and sleep or
yeah, one of the things that's important to note here is that these are matters of law, like I said before. I think that our legislature needs to take a look at many of these issues. They could include union activities as charitable or educational. They have that ability. They've written in several groups, such as the YMCA, I believe Boys and Girls Clubs. There's a Young Men's Hebrews Association. There are many entities that have been written into the law. And as was mentioned in the hearing with the IBTR last week, I've worked with my attorney and our local representatives to try to craft legislation that would benefit some of these groups.
Okay.
What kind of numbers are we talking about when we talk about property tax exemptions? How many exemptions are there in the county, and how much?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I first assumed office, that was one of the questions that was asked, and one of the things that we wanted to get an answer to. And believe it or not, there's over 7,000 exempt parcels in our county, and that told me right away that we really need to review these parcels for compliance with state law, and that's kind of what we've been doing. Not nearly as quick as I would have liked, but we are chipping away at that list, and that's the reason. In some of these cases that we're talking about, that's the reason why we're having this discussion today. We're reviewing them.
Okay. Do you have a sense of how it is statewide? I mean, who else is dealing with these issues?
It's another reason why it needs to be fixed legislatively, because I believe there to be inequity across county lines, and so it's up to local jurisdiction as to how these decisions are made, which can be dangerous.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Well, shifting gears here, wanted to touch on kind of the interesting political development of the day, which was this morning. We learned that State Auditor Dwayne Sawyer, who was just appointed 3 months ago by Mike Pence, he filled the vacancy left by Tim Berry when Tim Berry went to chair the state Republican Party. Dwayne Sawyer is the first African American to hold statewide office, so that was notable. But he left, not specifying, but saying family reasons he had to leave office. But it kind of raises the issue, and this is something that you've talked about when it comes to these more administrative positions, not policy-making positions, but administrative positions. And we touched on this last week when we talked about the
superintendent of public instruction.
Right,
exactly.
Right. So it raises the question whether these positions, although Dwayne Sawyer was appointed by the governor, it is an elected position. He would have.
Right.
So whether these positions should be elected or appointed, your thoughts on that kind of issue?
It's actually something I've thought about often, having served almost 3 years as the county assessor. Why is this position elected? As we've talked about in these matters with different union halls and church-type organizations or any other exempt organization, politics by default gets involved. And I think that as an assessor, I can't speak much for the auditor because I don't perform that function. I don't know a whole lot about it. But I would say that it would appear that some of these administrative positions, such as assessor, I could use that example because I know a little bit about the assessor, is that it could be appointed, and the job could still be done, and it could be argued that it could be done better because the politics is taken out. If it's possible to get the politics out, I think it needs to come out. It needs to be removed from the picture.
Well, former Governor Mitch Daniels put together the Indiana Commission on Local Government Reform to look at all these issues. The Kernan-Shepard report is what it was called for former Governor Joe Kernan and Chief Justice at the time, Randall Shepard, and they of course recommended this. That's one of the areas that hasn't been acted on, but nobody's looked at state government since then. So maybe this would be a good idea for Governor Pence to look at that and see if maybe this fits in with his legislative agenda.
Right.
It would be interesting. What I find interesting about the resignation is that we're getting closer and closer to the election for that office, and State Treasurer Richard Murdoch is term limited.
Right.
And so, this was seen before Dwayne Sawyer was appointed. This was seen as one of his possible next moves. So, if Governor Pence puts somebody in there who's, really got some staying power and a lot of charisma and everything, able to campaign well, then that'll affect the next year's election.
I think Republicans would like to see someone probably else there that has less baggage than Treasurer Murdoch does from the last Senate campaign.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see, who's appointed and as this all shakes out, what the ultimate reasons were for Mr. Sawyer's resignation.
Right. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you for watching this week. We wish you a happy Thanksgiving and safe travels. It looks like it's going to be treacherous out there, so we hope you get where you're going safely, and you'll be back next week to watch another Political Roundtable.